On the desk beside a clutter of Chinese textbooks was a medical result that changed the course of her life. Almost a week ago, Rachel had gone to the hospital to perform a series of tests. After experiencing bouts of dizziness, when the doctor told her she was 6 weeks pregnant, it shocked her. She was on the pill, and never in a million years did she think this could happen to her. As soon as she left the clinic, she texted Anthony, her boyfriend, but he didn't respond to the text. Since then, she had been calling him, but he wouldn't answer her calls. His lack of communication could only mean one thing, but Rachel didn't want to think that Anthony, the love of her life, would leave her hanging like that. Before the hospital visit, she and Anthony spoke at least 5 times a day. He also made sure to visit her as often as he could, despite their pressing academic schedules. She was worried that something terrible might have happened to him, but it was so convenient that something happened after she texted him about the pregnancy. She dialed Anthony's number again, and this time it didn't connect. Rachel sat on her bed, wondering what to do. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her phone in trembling hands. Her anxiety was palpable, tightening around her chest like a vice. Her mind raced through the consequences of this pregnancy and the effect it would have on her life. At 22 years old, she had big plans for her future. There was no allowance for pregnancy. She was still pondering this when the room door swung open with a flare and her roommate Sasha walked in with her bright red hair and colorful eyes. Shadow Sasha and Rachel were opposites. It was a wonder how they even managed to be friends. "Hi," Sasha greeted cheerily, walking over to her bed. "I didn't see you in class today." Both girls were in the same Chinese studies department. "Hi." Sasha. Rachel's troubled gaze traced Sasha to the other end of the room. When she saw Sasha's mobile phone, an idea came to mind. Sasha." Rachel walked over to Sasha, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Can I borrow your phone?" Sasha frowned, eyeing Rachel suspiciously. "Are you okay?" "You don't look good." Sasha raised an eyebrow, but she didn't refuse. She stretched the phone to Rachel. Rachel turned away from her friend and returned to the bed, dialing Anthony's number on Sasha's phone. Shock waves rolled through her body when Anthony took the call after a few rings. Hello. Realization dawned that Anthony picked up this call because he didn't know who it was. Just a few minutes ago, she had called him, but he didn't take her call. "Hello, Anthony," she probed. "Who is this?" Rachel glanced at Sasha, who was laying on the bed, engrossed by something on her laptop. She knew that this conversation might go a little sideways and needed some privacy, so she left the room and stepped into the hallway. "Anthony." There was a silence on the other end of the line, broken moments after by a harsh sigh. "Oh my goodness, Rachel, what is this?" "Anthony, I've been calling you. I haven't been taking your calls." "Shouldn't that tell you something?" Rachel's mouth fell open. She didn't expect him to be so rude. "Don't call me again, ever. It's over between us." Rachel stopped in the center of the hallway, her life falling apart. What's over this relationship?" he said with venom. "It's over." Rachel felt a torrent of tears threaten to fall, but she was surrounded by other students and didn't want to call negative attention to herself. She also couldn't return to her room because Sasha was the last person she wanted to find out about her problem. Sasha had once warned her about Anthony, but she didn't listen. The only option she had was to swallow her tears and keep a blank expression. "Do you hear me, Rachel?" he asked. "Don't call me anymore." "That's not possible," Rachel argued. "I'm pregnant. We're going to be parents. I'm pregnant." "I didn't sign up for that." He didn't sound surprised, so Rachel knew he saw her text, and that's why he disappeared and stopped taking her calls. "Anthony, I didn't sign up for that either, but it's here. I need us to." "Rachel, please," he snapped. "I'm in my final years. This is when I'm supposed to be highly focused, not worried about some baby that may not be mine." What? Rachel gasped. "Anthony, you said you were on the pills," he continued harshly. "It's not my fault you decided to be careless with your body." For every word that left his mouth, a small part of Rachel was chipped off until she was left bare and wounded. Besides the hurt she felt, she was shocked. Anthony was the sweetest boyfriend to her. He'd never spoken to her harshly or given her a feeling that he could be so cruel. It dawned on her that the burden of this pregnancy would rest on her alone, and it was too much to bear. "I'd advise that you terminate that pregnancy," Anthony said. "I want nothing to do with it, and I want nothing to do with you anymore. Have some shame and dignity, Rachel. Leave me alone." He hung up the call, and she held the phone to her face, staring at it like it had grown 2 heads. "Rachel," someone touched her shoulder, and she jumped, remembering she was standing in the middle of the dorm hallway. "Are you okay?" It was Leah, the girl next door. "I'm fine, Leah." "Thank you." Rachel wanted to run somewhere or get away, but she found herself going back to the room because of Sasha's phone. "Thank you," she said to Sasha, handing the device to her. "Rachel, are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine." Rachel didn't want to talk to anyone about this yet, not when the confusion and anxiety were still raw. She slid onto the bed and drew the sheets up to her chin, shutting her eyes tightly. Now that she could finally process her emotions properly, tears fell down her face. She felt like she was in an alternate universe and would wake up soon, but as she saw the tears drop slowly onto the pillow, It solidified the moment, and she knew that this was her reality. Anthony never loved her. That much was obvious. If he did, he would have handled this situation properly. She also wasn't ready for a child, but unlike Anthony, she couldn't decide not to handle it. The baby was growing inside her. She had to do something. Her only other option was to call home, which would never happen. Her parents were very conservative, and when she was leaving for college, they made her promise she wouldn't have a boyfriend until she was done with school. She really wanted to keep to the promise because she had always been sheltered, so men weren't her cup of tea until she met Anthony. Rachel met Anthony in the faculty headquarters when registering for her second courses as a student of Chinese studies. She shared the department with Anthony, who was studying political science. He was a year above her, so he provided some help and showed her around. He was the sweetest man to her and made her feel like a princess. Every day he would make the trip to her department with food and sit with her for a few minutes. He would also take her to the library and help her study. Long story short, her life became 10 times better when she met Anthony. So when he asked her out 6 months after their first meeting, she didn't hesitate to accept it. She was confident that her parents would love Anthony because he was the epitome of perfection. The first time they had sex, she felt a little guilty that she had let her parents and faith down, but Anthony made her feel like a princess, so she got over the guilt quickly. Soon she got on the pills because Anthony didn't like the feel of rubber, and she wanted to please him. That's how she ended up here. When she found out about the pregnancy, she texted him, knowing he was always there for her and expecting the same protection she thought that would come to her, and proffer a solution or make her feel like she wasn't alone. Instead, he'd completely disappeared. Now he said it was over. Where was she to go from here? Rachel stared at the book in front of her. Exams were coming up in a few weeks, and she needed to focus more on her academics at this period. But nothing was working. She had been in this library with a few of her colleagues for hours, and yet she was still stuck on one page. Her colleagues had flipped past several pages while some had even finished a textbook and picked another. Yet she was stuck on one page, overwhelmed with fear and anxiety. Where would she go from here? And at 8 weeks pregnant, she still hadn't told anyone besides Anthony. She had lots of friends in school, but she just realized what a superficial relationship she had with them, because she couldn't think of anyone she could confide in right now. As she struggled to concentrate on the book in front of her, a sudden wave of nausea overcame her. She clutched her stomach, ready to bolt towards the bathroom, but it was too late. She leaned over and threw up the contents of her stomach, lurching out on the library floor. Rachel's face turned bright red with shame as she fumbled to clean up her mess. The quiet library closed in on her as her friends and everyone present looked at her with concern. Rachel heard hushed whispers behind her, and it felt like a dagger to her heart. Embarrassment washed over her, and in that moment she disliked Anthony and thought about terminating the pregnancy. Panicked, she grabbed a handful of tissues from the nearby desk, her hands trembling as she tried to mop the mess. Her colleagues Nan and Abby hurried to her side, offering more tissues and a water bottle. "Thank you," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. She did her best to clean under the scrutiny of many students while her colleagues watched with suspicious eyes. Her face burned with embarrassment, and she struggled to explain what happened. "Are you okay?" Abby asked, touching her shoulders. "Yeah," Rachel forced a smile. "I must have eaten something that didn't agree with me after cleaning." Rachel could no longer stay because it felt like everyone was staring at her. Her friends offered to walk her out, but she declined, needing some space to be alone. As she gathered her things and left the library, her heart ached with the weight of the burden. All through the journey home, she kept thinking about whether her colleagues bought her lie or whether they already knew she was pregnant. She felt alone and afraid, with no one to call or talk to. Later that evening, when Sasha returned to the room, things worsened. Sasha came straight to Rachel's bunk with a curious look of confusion on her face. "Rachel, are you pregnant?" What Rachel's heart skipped. "Abby and Nina said you threw up in the library today," Sasha said. "Are you pregnant?" Why would Na and Abby conclude she was pregnant? Who else have they told this to? Rachel gaped at Sasha, wondering if she should just tell her the truth. There was no point hiding it anymore. Sasha was her roommate, and would be among the first people to find out she was pregnant when the bump started showing. "Yes," she said. "I am." While Sasha stared at her critically. "What do you plan to do?" I don't know." Rachel shook her head, tears threatening to fall. Sasha sat beside her on the bed. "I'm going to assume it's Anthony's." "It is," Rachel cried. "But he's left me." "I don't know what to do." "Anthony left you?" Sasha asked, running her hand down Rachel's back comfortingly. For the first time, Rachel cried to someone about it. "He left you before he found out or after?" Sasha asked. "After he found out." "I don't want to say I told you so," Rachel. Sasha said. "But Anthony was literally a red flag." "How didn't you see it?" "Sasha, I'm so hurt. How could he do this to me?" "I'm confused. I don't know what to do." "Don't cry, please," Sasha pleaded. "We will figure this out, okay?" "Don't worry." The conversation with Sasha helped Rachel recalibrate her thoughts, and from then on she could lean on Sasha for comfort and advice. Going to classes was a problem because after her stint in the library, the rumor spread that she was pregnant, and people would stare a hole in her back like they'd never seen a pregnant girl before. So many times, when she felt overwhelmed with shame and anxiety, she thought about aborting her pregnancy, but Sasha always kept her sane. As the pregnancy grew, she and Sasha's bond grew more profound. On the last day of her exams, she was 14 weeks pregnant. Her exams were tough because she couldn't focus and read much. Her baby bump wasn't too big, but it was already noticeable, and it was a constant reminder of the mistakes she made. She was still coming to terms with her pregnancy, but she was past the point of committing an abortion. After the last exam, she was walking down the faculty hallway when she came across 4 of her friends. Before her pregnancy, she was pretty popular in her department and had a lot of friends, but now people barely talked to her. All her friends kept their distance, except Sasha. So when her 4 friends stopped to talk to her in the hallway, she was excited. Rachel, hi, they giggled, hugging her briefly. Hi, girl, she tried to hide her excitement. How was the exam? It was good, they answered. Then Amy glanced down at her bump. How's the pregnancy? It's going well, thank you. The girls hummed. It must be so hard carrying the baby of a man who wouldn't even acknowledge it, Emily groaned. I'd die before I let that happen to me. Yay, Diana agreed. And you're so pretty. Every boy in this department wanted you. How could you be so careless? Rachel blanched at their words. The blood rushed to her head as her friends talked about her, and a deep feeling of betrayal heated her blood. There was only one person she had told the identity of the father of her unborn child, and it was Sasha. She didn't want to believe that Sasha would tell these girls. At least now you won't have any more appeal, and the boys will finally move on from you, Iris chuckled. Her voice dripped with jealousy, and Rachel wondered why she hadn't noticed this before. She pushed past them, storming down the hall without looking back. I was just joking, Iris shouted after her, and the other girls laughed. When Rachel got to her dorm room, Sasha was there. What's wrong? Sasha asked when Rachel stared at her. Are you mad I didn't wait for you after the exams? I'm so sorry. I had to use the bathroom. What did you tell Amy and her gang about me? Rachel asked. Ask what? Sasha sat up, her face scrunched in a frown. What do you mean? Why did you tell them about Anthony? Rachel asked. Nothing. Sasha rose to her feet. I didn't tell them. That's not true, Rachel interrupted. You're the only one I've told about the father of this child. If Amy and the girls know, it's because someone told them. I didn't. Tell me the truth, Sasha, please. Fine. I told them. Something snapped in Sasha's expression, and Rachel saw cruelty staring back at her. It was so real she staggered back. Sasha, why? Rachel shook her head. You knew they would mock me. They've avoided me since the pregnancy news hit the department. Why did you do that to me? Rachel, it's not my fault that you chose a boy who wouldn't own up to his responsibilities, Sasha snapped. You're the dream girl of almost every guy in that department, yet you fell for this bum. Anthony is not a bum, Rachel argued, and I don't need your advice. I just want to know why you felt like it was within your right to tell those girls my secret. I am so disappointed in you. How about you being disappointed in yourself? Sasha asked. I'm not the reason you're in this position. She walked out the door, slamming it shut in Rachel's face. The following days were hell for Rachel because now that Sasha didn't have to pretend anymore, she made the dorm unbearable. It was hard to leave the safety of her room because everyone had an opinion on how to live her life. The day her parents called, Rachel's heart skipped several beats. She talked to her parents once a week, so they never bothered her. Seeing the phone ring and her mother's name on it almost gave her a heart attack. But after watching the phone for a few moments, Rachel took the call. Hi, Mom. Rachel, her mother cheered. How are you, sweetheart? Are you done with your exams? Yes, Mom. I'm waiting for the results. Rachel, we miss you, her mom said, and those 3 simple words caused Rachel to react emotionally. Tears pricked her throat, and she blinked them back. If there was anything she was sure of, it was her family's love for her. But when they learned of her mistake, would the love be able to withstand the disappointment they would feel? Rachel wasn't so sure. All her life she had been raised a certain way. She knew how her parents reacted to girls who got pregnant out of wedlock, and she never thought one day she would be in the same shoes. It felt like she had betrayed her parents, and the thought killed her. Are you there, sweetheart? Yes, Mom. Rachel infused cheer in her voice. I miss you too. I miss everyone. Will you be able to make it home for winter break? Rachel badly wanted to go home, but she couldn't. It would be a huge mistake going home with her baby bump showing. It would disgrace her family, which was the last thing she wanted. I wish I could, Mom, she said. We have some difficult courses next semester, so I'm staying back to take lessons. Oh, Mom, she paused. Okay, I'm sorry about that, sweetheart. Take it easy. All right. All right, Mom. Rachel knew she had to get off the phone soon or she would burst into tears. I've got to go, okay? I'll call you soon, okay? You sure you're okay? Yes, I'm okay. She forced a laugh to keep her mother pacified. I'm fine, all right, sweetheart. Love you. Love you too, Mama. As soon as the call ended, Rachel got an email notifying her that her grades had been posted. She sat up in bed, her heart beating in her chest. She logged into her student profile, her finger hovering over the link that would take her to the Grades tab. Usually she was never scared to check her results. During her first year, she did exceptionally well and was one of the best students in class. But this semester, she didn't know what to expect, and her hands shook with nerves. Although she tried her best to read and go to the library, focusing on academics was hard. Every exam she wrote was with half a mind, and for a department like Chinese studies that wasn't good enough. With a burst of courage, she clicked the link and watched it load, her heart leaping into her mouth. The grades finally loaded, and Rachel scanned the screen. Each course was listed with a letter grade next to it. Rachel's face fell as she read the letter F next to each course. Her shoulders slumped, and she stared at the screen, completely numb. No, it was a single word, but it tore from her mouth with a sob as her world shattered around her. She took 5 courses this semester, and she failed everything. Oh God, the tears blurred her vision. And in that moment, the only person she hated more than Anthony was herself. How could she let herself be so stupid? She angrily wiped her tears and clicked through the breakdown of her scores and assignments, realizing that she had done well in those. But they weren't enough to give her a pass mark when she failed the exams woefully. The tears continued to fall the harder she wiped, so she gave into it, hoping that after the sobs, she could figure out what to do with her life. She was still crying when the door swung open and Sasha walked in. And to make matters worse, she was accompanied by Amy, Emily, Diana, and Iris. Rachel tried to hide her tears, but it was too late. The girls had already seen it. "Oh, what's wrong?" Sasha asked with concern. "You look like a wreck." Rachel looked up at her roommate, confused as to why she acted like she cared. For weeks now, Sasha had been so mean. "Talk to me," Sasha said with a pout. "What's wrong?" Nothing. Rachel didn't trust Sasha anymore and didn't want to give her any more ammunition. "I'm fine. I think she just saw her grades," Amy said. "I knew she couldn't pass her exams with an unwanted pregnancy. Something's got to give." Amy's comment made Rachel gasp, her hurt spreading through her blood. These girls used to be some of her closest friends. It was shocking how quickly they turned against her. Sasha frowned. "Why are you upset? Your grades are as bad as your life choices." Rachel blanched. She had never been the confrontational type, and against 5 girls who seemed to hate her, she knew she stood no chance. Immediately, she started packing her luggage. Staying here would only deteriorate her mental health further. She had to leave. "How did you let things get so bad?" Diana asked. "You had so many guys falling at your feet, but you chose a guy who ditched you when you needed him the most." Rachel didn't think it was possible to feel any more hurt, but the more the girls spoke, the more damage it did to her soul and self-esteem. Oh, how she had fallen from being a girl they admired to being one they bullied and ganged up against. "Where are you going?" Sasha asked as Rachel wheeled her luggage toward the door. Rachel didn't answer. "Fine, and make sure you never return," Sasha growled as she walked out the door. For hours, Rachel wandered campus, wondering where to stay. Her closest friends were already against her, and the only people she could turn to for help were mere acquaintances. It didn't help that she already had a noticeable bump, and everywhere she went, students stared like they'd never seen a pregnant woman before. Finally, she decided to go to Nina. Rachel and Nina were reading partners, so she hoped that she could stay with her for some time until she figured out the next step to take. As she went to Nina's dorm, she said a little prayer in her mind. It wasn't like she thought her prayers would be answered. She had been going through so many hardships lately that it was obvious that the God up there was very upset with her. Rachel arrived at Nina's dorm exhausted and tense. Nina opened the door and immediately noticed her distress. Rachel broke down again as Nina ushered her into the room. "Can I stay with you for a while, until I sort things out?" she asked amidst tears. "I know it's a bother, but please, I'll leave soon." "Sure," Nina nodded. "But what happened to your room?" "I can't stay there anymore," Rachel sobbed. "Sasha is being mean. I don't know what I did to her." "I'm so sorry." Nina pulled Rachel into a comforting hug. "You can stay with me. I'll talk to my roommate." "You'll be fine," Rachel sniffed. "Thank you, Na. I just didn't know where to turn." Nas smiled. "I'm glad you felt safe enough to come here. Don't cry anymore, all right? It's not good for the baby." "How far along are you?" 15 weeks, Rachel replied. Na nodded. "You should rest, okay? I'll get us something to eat." Rachel stayed with Na and her roommate Kayla for 2 weeks until the girls left for winter break. While they were away, Rachel remained in the dorm. She had never felt so alone in her life. She cried every day, and her pain intensified when she had an online meeting with her professor, who told her she would have to resit all her second-year courses and pass them in one go or face an extra year. During the break, she tried to read, but it was still hard to focus. Her pregnancy symptoms were intensifying, and between hospital visits and pregnancy fatigue, she could hardly get a single word done. Her life was falling apart, and no one could mend it for her. On Christmas Day, the dorm was almost empty because other students had left to be with their families. The urge to be home was so strong that Rachel picked up her phone and called her mom, ready to confess everything. "Hello," Rachel's dad answered. "Dad, hey, how are you? Missing you," he said. "It's not a complete Christmas without you, sweetheart. I'm sorry I couldn't come home. I'll try to make it for Easter, or I'll visit after New Year." "Easter is too far not to see my baby," Rachel laughed. "Dad, where's Mom?" "Hold on," her dad said. "She's probably somewhere around the house. You know your mom. She always leaves her phone unattended." Rachel laughed and stayed on the phone until her dad found her mom in the kitchen. "It's Rachel," Dad said, and Mom came on. "Sweetheart, hi, Merry Christmas. We miss you." Rachel fought tears. "I miss you all too. There's something I have to tell you." "Oh, what is it?" Rachel struggled for words as she thought about the best way to deliver the news. She heard her dad say, "Is Rachel still on?" "Yes," Mom answered. Dad said Rachel into the phone. "I forgot to tell you before handing Mom the phone, but I love you so much, sweetheart." Rachel burst into a quiet sob that hurt her chest. Her father, oblivious to her emotions, continued, "I am so proud of you. You've never disappointed me. I'm grateful for a child like you. Merry Christmas, okay? See you after the New Year." "Thank you, Dad," Rachel forced out. "I love you too." When Mom got back on the line, she said, "What did you want to tell me?" "Nothing," Rachel said immediately. How could she tell them such disappointing news shortly after what Dad had just said? It would break their hearts. She couldn't do it. Dad said it all. "I just wanted to tell you all I love you. We love you too." The winter break lasted 6 weeks, after which students started returning to school, and the dorms were slowly filling up. Now also resumed school, and so did her roommate. Rachel was registering for her new semester courses and processing a new dorm room, which kept her busy most of the time. One hot afternoon, she was returning from the faculty, tired and hungry. She reached her room door and was about to open it when she heard her name. This made her pause. "Gosh, I can't stand her anymore. I wish she would leave." It was Na's voice. "She literally looks like a whale." Rachel froze at the door, her hands on the knob. Kayla laughed, like Na had just made the joke of the century. "I thought Rachel was your friend." "She is my friend," Na groaned, "but I'm tired of the inconvenience. She's always sad, and it wears me out. If I were her, I'd be sad too," Kayla said. "Cut her some slack." "I'm trying," Na answered. "But Sasha already found out Rachel stays with me, and they're starting to look at me somehow. If you know Sasha, you'd know you don't want to be in her bad books. I want Rachel gone, to be honest." Heartbreak and betrayal spread through Rachel. Between Na and Sasha turning against her, she didn't know which hurt more. At 24 weeks pregnant, her bump was more noticeable, making her self-conscious, especially among students who cared greatly about their bodies and appearance. Hearing Na call her a whale had her already low self-esteem plummeting. She knew she didn't look as good as she used to, but she could have gone without being labeled a whale. It hurt her so much, and being called an inconvenience on top of that made it worse. Rachel knew she could not stay here anymore. Not after hearing everything said about her. She took a moment to calm herself before walking into the room with a smile. It was the hardest smile she had ever worn in her life. "Hey girls," she greeted Nina and Kayla, who cheerfully greeted her. "Hey Rachel, were you able to fully register for the courses?" Na asked. "I'll do mine tomorrow. Not all my courses," Rachel said, "but I was able to get a room." She reached for her luggage. "So I'll be leaving." Na gasped. "Just when I was getting used to having you here," she pouted. Rachel laughed and hugged her. "Thank you for everything, Na. I appreciate you," Na smiled. "Thank you." Rachel turned to Kayla, who was lying on the bunk. "And you too, Kayla." "Thank you." "You're welcome." Rachel. Kayla's smile was tight. "I'll see you girls around." Rachel wheeled her luggage out of the room without a backward glance. For hours she roamed the school, knowing she had nowhere else to go. It was getting late when she sat in one of the school gardens, realizing that her only option now was home. She needed someone else's strength because hers was depleted. She had failed all her courses and was facing the risk of an extra year. She had no friends and no place to stay. Right now she wanted to run and hide away from the world. But before she did, she had to call her parents. They loved her very much. She knew that their love should be able to transcend all things. She called her father first, because she knew he would be the most difficult. "Rachel, sweetheart," her dad answered the phone in the sweetest way. "Dad," her voice broke. "Rachel," there was panic in her dad's voice. "Are you crying?" "I want to come home for a few days." "Sure," he said immediately. "Do you want me to book you a ticket, Dad?" "I'm pregnant," she sobbed. "I'm 24 weeks pregnant. I'm so sorry." There was a loud silence on the other end of the line, and it gave Rachel hope for all of 2 seconds before her dad exploded. "What did you just say?" Hard steel ran through his voice. I'm pregnant, Dad. I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Oh my God," he growled. "That's why you didn't come home for the break. You weren't studying, you were hiding. 24 weeks. I'm so sorry, Dad, sorry." "What does sorry fix?" he yelled. It fixes nothing. Who is the father? My ex-boyfriend, Rachel answered, dreading when she would tell him the baby's father had refused responsibility for the child. Who is he? Her dad asked. I need to talk to him. Rachel's shoulders slumped. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the baby. What? So not only are you pregnant, but you're having a baby for a guy who isn't even mature enough to own up to his responsibilities. Rachel, you're a disgrace. It was all too much for Rachel, and thoughts of ending her life flashed before her eyes. Please do not come home, her father said. You don't have a home here anymore. Dad, she cried harder. If her family also abandoned her, she would have no one. I am terribly disappointed in you. He hung up the phone. She was still staring at it with disbelief when it rang. This time it was her mom. Mom, Rachel's mom sounded hushed and urgent. Your father just told me. Is it true? Yes, Mom. Oh God, her mom gasped. Rachel, how could you? Having a child outside wedlock. It was a mistake, Rachel cried. Please, I want to come home. I don't have a place to stay anymore. Oh, Rachel, her mom paused. Hold on. Let me speak to your dad. When her mother hung up, Rachel crossed her fingers, hoping her father gave her more grace than her ex-friends. When her mom called minutes later, from her tone, Rachel knew she was doomed. Sweetheart, I'm sorry. Her mother sounded like she had been crying. Your dad is very upset and doesn't want to see you. Can you sort yourself out for a while? He claims he never wanted to see you again, but I can talk to him. Rachel hung up, her hurt twisting into anger and hate for herself, hate for everyone around her, who didn't give her grace and comfort when things were good. She thought friends and family genuinely loved her. It turned out it was all a lie. She threw her phone to the ground and rose to her feet. There were still a few bills left in her pocket, and she headed for the bus station. She didn't know what she wanted. All she knew was that she had to escape this town. The farther she walked away, the harder the ache in her heart. She almost ran back to her phone, but she kept focused. As she neared the bus station, her father had all but disowned her, just like the rest. There was no need to keep hanging on and waiting for a miracle. She needed to take charge of her life and sort her problems out. The first step was getting out of town. By the time Rachel got to the next town, it was almost midnight. She had never been alone in a city, let alone this late at night. She didn't know what to do and hung around the bus park, hoping she had not made a huge mistake. As she ventured further away from the bus station, fear gripped her. The dim lights from the street poles cast long shadows on the empty sidewalk. Everything seemed to conspire against her, and the biting cold amplified this loneliness. Rachel didn't know where she was going, but she kept walking, randomly taking turns in the road and wheeling her luggage behind her. Somehow she found herself in a decrepit neighborhood. The streets were littered with debris and broken bottles. Occasionally, a huge rat would scurry out of the gutter and across the road, causing her heart to jump into her throat. At the end of this road was a park, and Rachel immediately recognized it as a shelter. There were tattered blankets and rickety benches scattered around the place, along with tired-looking people in different stages of consciousness. Some people were asleep on the bare floor. Rachel met the sharp eyes of a grisly older man sitting at the edge of the park, and at the intensity in them, she looked away and tried to find a good spot. Scattered around the park were several figures, each wrapped in different layers of clothing. Excuse me, Rachel approached a man huddled beneath a sagging blanket. His back was against a tree, his head hung with defeat and exhaustion. Beside him was a shopping cart filled with his tattered belongings. Something told Rachel that if she wasn't careful, she might end up like this man. Excuse me, please, she said, stopping close to the man. When his head snapped up, he grabbed his shopping cart closer. His eyes darted across her face. Go away, please. What is this place? She asked. I need a place to stay tonight. I see people lying on the floor already. But is someone in charge? No one in charge, he said quickly. Abandoned park. Thank you. Only when Rachel took a few steps back did the man release his shopping cart. She turned away and chose an isolated part of the park. There, she put some of her clothes on the floor and lay on it, resting her head. She instantly relaxed, and the tiredness seeped from her bones, leaving her completely exhausted. It was ironic that it was on this spread of clothes, in the middle of nowhere, that she felt some semblance of comfort and peace, not while she was with her friend Sasha or with Na. Here she was, surrounded by the homeless who minded their business as if they were being paid, and she felt calm enough to unwind and fall asleep. Finally, tomorrow she would sort out a better accommodation. She couldn't stay here for a long time. Rachel had been sleeping in the abandoned park for over a fortnight, and life had become harder than ever as a pregnant woman. No one gave her a job, so she was left scraping from hand to mouth. Getting breakfast was hard, getting lunch was harder, and dinner was the hardest, so she usually skipped that one. That was because every night someone brought food to the abandoned park. Rachel didn't know who this woman was, but she knew it was a sort of good Samaritan who had a desire to help people. When this woman came to the park, the struggle to get a plate of food was surreal, and Rachel realized she couldn't engage in such a brawl for food. Aside from the fact that she was never raised like that, she was also pregnant. She had lived with these people in this park long enough to know that they didn't care about her pregnancy. None of them had ever asked how she was feeling. They hardly ever spoke to her. This park was the real definition of mind your business that night. As Rachel slept again on a hungry stomach, she could only pray that her baby was fine. She could not afford health care, so it had been weeks since she checked on the baby. Aside from health care, basic feeding was impossible, which meant she only ate once or twice a day, and in small quantities. More than anything, Rachel missed her family, but she had cut them off just like they cut her off, and there was no looking back. She was sleeping that night when she heard a loud commotion and knew that the food lady was there again. Her stomach violently rumbled with hunger, but she didn't move to rise because she knew there was no way the food would get to her. Minutes later, she heard people arguing and glanced up to see the lady holding an extra food plate out of everybody's reach. "This is for the pregnant woman over there," the lady said, pointing in Rachel's direction. Rachel sat up in shock and watched the woman approach, holding the food. As she drew near, Rachel realized that the woman was a young girl, probably around her age. "Here it is," the girl said softly, sitting on the floor next to Rachel. "Eat." Rachel ate quickly, satisfying the hunger with each swallow. She could feel the girl's eyes on her, which made her wary. When Rachel finished the food, she turned to the girl. "Thank you so much. What's your name?" The girl asked with a smile. It was the first time someone had smiled at her since she left college. "Hi, Rachel. I'm Dee," she said, stretching out an arm, and they shook hands. "What are you doing out here with this stomach?" Dee asked softly. "It's not safe." Rachel couldn't bear to look Dee in the eyes. "It's only temporary," she lied. "I won't be here for a long time." Dee shook her head. "It's my second time seeing you here," she said. "You obviously don't have anywhere to go." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "I'm fine." "You don't look like the others," Dee said softly, "and that's what brought me to you." Rachel stayed quiet, tears blurring her vision. "Come with me." Dee rose to her feet, pulling Rachel up with her. What? Rachel's eyes widened. "Come with you." "To where?" Rachel asked. Dee frowned. "My home." Dee chuckled. "You'll be safer there at this point." Rachel was tired of living with people and having them talk behind her. She preferred to stay in the park. At least no one bothered her here. She was alone. "I can't," she told Dee. "I appreciate you, Dee, but I can't accept that from you. I can't." "Rachel." Dee cut her off. "You see these other people?" She pointed to everyone sleeping on their mats around the park. "They don't have a future for themselves," she said. "They belong here." Rachel frowned. "These homeless people don't really want a home. They like it here. And for them, this is a job," Dee continued. "When I took one look at you, I realized you weren't like that. You want to be out of here, whether you accept it or not, and that's what I want to do for you." "But why?" Rachel asked. "You just met me." Dee shrugged. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that I want to help you get out of here. How far along are you?" 26 weeks. "Great," Dee nodded. "Do this for your baby." Rachel, embarrassed, packed her luggage and followed Dee out of the abandoned park. They reached Dee's home quickly, and Rachel was surprised to find out it was not much. It was a trailer park, the exterior marked by weather stains and graffiti. It was like a small rectangular box with missing windows and uneven wooden steps. "It's not much," Dee giggled like she could read Rachel's mind, "but it's home." When they got into the house, there was a wheelchair-bound man in the living room, staring into space. When he heard them come in, he turned, his eyes full of surprise. "Dee, who is your friend?" "Uncle Rufus, this is Rachel," Dee said. "She will be staying with us for a while. I hope you don't mind." Uncle Rufus's smile widened. "Of course I don't. The more, the merrier." He turned to Rachel. "Welcome to our humble abode." "Thank you, sir. Let me show you." And Dee trudged through the rickety hallway and stopped in front of a door. She opened it and threw the door open, allowing her entry. Before she did, it was a small room but neat and airy. "You and I will stay here," Rachel said. "We only have 2 rooms in the house. Uncle Rufus has one." Rachel sat down her luggage. "I don't know how to thank you enough, Dee. I'm beyond grateful for this. Thank you so much. You're welcome." Rachel cleared her throat before she asked a pressing question on her mind. "I thought you were wealthy," she said softly. "How are you able to afford food for the homeless?" Dee sat on the bed and patted the space beside her, making room for Rachel. "I work in an international restaurant chain as a dishwasher," she said. "It's easy to get packs of food on weekends, which I bring to the park for the homeless." "Okay, can I also ask you a question?" Dee asked, and Rachel panicked. She had never told anyone about herself since she dropped out of school and went incommunicado for over 2 weeks. It hurt to even think about what she had been through. She didn't want to imagine what it would feel like talking about it. "It's okay if you don't want to answer," Dee said quickly, noticing Rachel's hesitation. "You can ask me." "Nee." Rachel forced a smile. Talking to Dee was the least she could do after everything Dee did for her today. "How did you end up at the park?" Dee asked curiously, sitting cross-legged on the bed. Rachel took a deep breath and told her everything. Surprisingly, she didn't cry, and to her relief, there was no pity in Dee's eyes. "So you just dropped your phone and got into a bus?" Dee asked incredulously. "Pretty much. You are so brave," Rachel laughed. "I can hardly call it that." Dee shook her head. "If you feel bad about dropping out of college, don't. There's always time." "How old are you?" 23. "See, I'm 24, and I've never been to college," Dee said. "Why?" "Because I cannot leave Uncle Rufus," she said. "He fell while cutting a tree and was bedridden for years before he could use a wheelchair. This happened just before I was supposed to get into the university to study business administration. I'm the only one Uncle Rufus has, and so I couldn't leave him while my mates were going off to college." "I'm so sorry," Rachel said. "That's a huge sacrifice." "I don't think so," Dee chuckled. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 6 years old. At the time, my parents and Uncle Rufus were estranged, so I had no relationship with him. No one expected him to take me in, but he did. At 6 years old, I was a child. Uncle Rufus cared for me and paid all my bills until I was 16. That's when he had his accident." "I'm so sorry, Dee." Rachel suddenly saw Dee as a kindred spirit, except that she brought her own suffering upon herself by having sex with an irresponsible guy. "Nah, don't be. Uncle Rufus is worth it," Rachel said. Rachel fell back on the bed. "I don't want to be a liability to you, Dee," she said. "Can you help me put in a word at the restaurant where you work so I can get a job, please?" She was tired of being a disturbance to people, plus she needed money to get health care. "I'll talk to my manager when I go in tomorrow," Dee said. "He's a nice man. When I explain your situation to him, he'll likely give you a job, okay?" In 3 days, Rachel got a job as a janitor and dishwasher alongside Dee in the restaurant. They would leave home together, work, and return together. Slowly, Rachel began to heal. She had only known Dee for a short time, but the love between them was real. Dee would follow her to prenatal appointments and was always there when she needed comfort or missed her family. 3 months after they met, Rachel gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. She named him Harry. "Uncle Rufus, can you run faster than me?" Harry asked, climbing onto Uncle Rufus's lap. He was 3.5 years old, and his favorite human was Uncle Rufus. He didn't mind that Uncle Rufus was wheelchair-bound. He always wanted to do everything with him. Right now, it was almost 8:00 a.m. on Monday morning, and Rachel was trying to get him off Uncle Rufus so he could prepare for preschool. But anytime she tried to pull him off, Harry would scream and shout. "Leave him alone," Uncle Rufus laughed. "I'll take him to school, Uncle Rufus. That'll be a bother." Rachel glared at Harry. "Harry, come on, no. I want to stay with Uncle Rufus." "You ready?" "Ready." Rachel. Dee walked out of their room, ready to go. "Why is Harry not ready?" she groaned. "We're going to be late because of this little rascal." Harry stuck out his tongue at Dee, and she gasped, making Rachel laugh. "Someone's not going to get a cupcake today," Dee threatened. "I'm sorry, Aunt Dee." Harry quickly apologized. "You girls run along," Uncle Rufus said. "I'll take Harry to school." "Are you sure you can manage?" Rachel asked worriedly. Uncle Rufus nodded. Harry's school was only a few minutes away from the house, and Uncle Rufus had taken him to school several times before. "Thanks, Uncle Rufus," Rachel said and kissed Harry's cheek. "Bye, I love you." "I love you too, Mom." Harry kissed her and waved to Dee. "Love you, Aunt Dee." "Love you, Dee," and Rachel said as they left the house, like they'd been doing together for over 2 years. As they walked to work, Rachel thought about how far she had come and how her life had new joys and meanings. She still hadn't contacted her parents in over 3 years, and there were nights when she would miss them. It was like a physical ache in her chest, but they broke her that day, and she never wanted to see them again. When everyone turned their backs on her, she reached out to her parents, expecting them to be there, but they let her down. It had been 3 years since she'd had Harry, and she would never change this for anything. He had been a source of happiness to her, and it was ironic that she suffered the most because of him. If you asked Rachel, she would go through it all again for Harry. Later that day, Rachel was cleaning the meeting room when she heard a group of people speaking in Chinese. A nostalgic feeling hit her, and she was about to walk away when their words became clearer. One of them was saying, "This company is naive. They won't see through our scam." The second Chinese speaker responded with, "Yes, we just need to create a convincing proposal and present ourselves as a potential partner with innovative technology." Rachel frowned and stopped cleaning. The Chinese speakers were at the restaurant to meet with the manager and form a partnership, but if this was what they were saying, it simply meant they didn't have good intentions. Another one said, "We'll prepare a high-profile presentation and some fake success stories. Once they're hooked, we can negotiate a large initial investment. We'll ask for funds up front for research and development, and then we will disappear. Do you all understand?" "Yes." "Good. Now let's go get it." Rachel pretended to clean as they filed out of the office and headed for the door. "Good afternoon," she greeted them. "Good afternoon." When they left, Rachel hurriedly went to find Dee. Dee was cleaning the kitchen and was fortunately alone when Rachel found her. She told her everything she had learned. Just keep quiet about it, Dee said. Or if things go wrong, we would lose our jobs. But Dee, if this Chinese company scams ours, we may also lose our jobs, Rachel argued. Dee sighed. I understand, but Rachel, really the probability of something going wrong is higher. We're bottom staff in this company. No one would believe us. Dee was right, and Rachel decided to stay quiet. However, as she returned to her post, she walked past the manager's office and overheard the Chinese guys giving a stellar business presentation. Rachel wanted to walk past and act like she didn't know their plans, but she knew she would live with the guilt for the rest of her life. So she took a deep breath and barged into the office. The Chinese presenter stopped and arched his eyebrows at her, while the manager rushed to his feet. Excuse me, cleaners aren't meant to be here at this time. Excuse us, there's something you must know, Sir Rachel said, grabbing the microphone from the presenter. She told the manager everything she overheard. These people plan to wreck the company and steal from us. The Chinese officials gasped in fake outrage. I cannot believe this, they cried, turning to the manager. Mr. Belfast, if you didn't want to do business with us, you should have said so. This is a total disgrace, and we will never forget it. Forgive me, please, Mr. Wong, the manager pleaded. I will deal with her accordingly. Don't worry, this partnership is already over. Mr. Wong snapped and walked out of the meeting room with his associates. Rachel gaped after them, knowing she had messed up. They twisted everything around to make it look like she was crazy, but she knew what she heard. Rachel, Mr. Belfast called, his body shaking with rage. Please pack all your things and leave. You are fired. Not only you, but for what you just did, Dee is also fired. I don't want to see you two near this establishment again. Come on, Rachel, Dee groaned. You can't be serious. I am serious, Rachel answered evenly, even though tears clogged her throat. I always ruin everything for you. You don't ruin anything, Dee argued. Please stay. Rachel shook her head. She felt terrible and selfish. Dee had warned her about telling the manager what she heard, but she didn't listen. Now they'd both lost their jobs, their only means of livelihood. Not only did she feel bad, but she also felt embarrassed. What did she think would happen? That the manager would thank her and send the Chinese officials away? Impossible. She was a janitor, and that's what she would always be. It was late evening when she wheeled her luggage into the living room. She wanted nothing more than to stay with Dee, but she could never live with the guilt. Rachel, Uncle Rufus called softly. You're taking this too far. Uncle Rufus, Rachel shook her head, tears slipping down her face. You don't understand. Dee had this job before she met me. She found me this job because she wanted to help me. The best thing I could have done was keep my big mouth shut. I didn't listen to Dee, now see. We can find another job easily, Dee said sadly. Don't do this, Rachel pulled her friend into a hug. Thank you, Dee, for everything you've done for me. I promise I'll never forget. I'll pay you back, Dee looked unhappy, and Rachel hugged Uncle Rufus too. Thank you, Uncle Rufus. He released a deep breath. Thank you too. Thank you also for Harry. He's been my source of joy for all these years. Rachel almost cried again because she knew Harry would be another issue. Right now he was in preschool, and she planned to pick him up on her way to the shelter. They would have to stay there until she got an apartment. She had saved some money, but she would need to properly plan how that would be spent. She walked to the trailer door and then turned to wave at them. Goodbye, Dee, she said. Goodbye, Uncle Rufus. She walked out before she could change her mind. It had been a week since Rachel left, and it felt like a part of Dee was missing. Rachel had come to mean more to her than a friend, and although Dee was upset about what Rachel did at the company, she didn't think it was worth losing her best friend over. Then there was Harry, a little fireball who kept everyone on their toes. Harry and Rachel's absence made the house very dull. You should go talk to her, Uncle Rufus said. You said you know where she is. Yeah, I traced her to the love shelter. That's where she is with Harry. But you know how stubborn she is. Uncle Rufus, I know. I miss her and Harry too. What do you think we should do? Dee was about to respond when there was a knock on their door. She jumped to her feet and raced to the door, hoping it was Rachel finally coming to her senses. However, when she opened the door, it was a young, handsome man standing there. He looked perfect in his expensive black suit. Behind him was a black, luxurious car. Hello, the man smiled. Hi, my name is David. Is Rachel here? Dee's eyes widened. Rachel, yes, please. Dee shook her head. She moved out. David's face fell. Do you know where I can find her? Depends. Dee crossed her arms. Who are you? David withdrew a card from his breast pocket and handed it to Dee. My name is David Monar, he said, owner of the Darcy restaurant chain. I want to thank Rachel for saving my company from bankruptcy. If not for her, we would have lost millions of dollars. Rachel and her 3-year-old son Harry were lying in their bunks while Rachel read him a storybook. Rachel knew that Harry wasn't happy because he hadn't seen his uncle and aunt in a week, but whenever Rachel thought of them, she felt overwhelming guilt. It hurt that she had to leave them, but right now she was feeling too much like bad luck for their family. We will see them soon, she said to her son. They are. Hello, Rachel. Rachel looked up to see a matron standing at the door. There's someone outside to see you. Rachel frowned. Me. Yes, the matron nodded and walked away. Frowning, Rachel climbed down from the bunk, carrying Harry with her. No one knew she was here, so how could anyone be here to see her? When she walked out into the reception, she was shocked to see Dee standing beside a very handsome man in a dark suit. Harry wiggled from her arms and ran into Dee's arms. Aunt Dee, Harry exclaimed. Rachel's gaze kept flitting to the man, who continued to smile at her like he knew her. It made her blush. Rachel, Dee said, "This is Mr. David Monar, owner of the Darcy restaurant Chantra." Rachel's mouth fell open. Where we used to work. Yes? Hi, Rachel. David stepped forward. I'm here to thank you. You saved my company from ruin. We would have lost millions of dollars if you hadn't reported what you heard. But I was fired for it. I'm sorry about that, David said remorsefully. After you left, we researched the company and discovered those Chinese investors were indeed a scam. They've successfully scammed many businesses in the country, and we were next. But thanks to you, we got through it. Rachel nodded at him. You're welcome. David looked around the place with a disapproving stare. Please get your luggage, he said. I'm moving you out of here. In the twinkle of an eye, Rachel's life changed. David moved her and Harry into an executive suite in a 5-star hotel, while promising to find a suitable living space for them. She was still in awe when there was a knock on the door, and when she opened it, it was a huge bouquet, a beautiful dress, and an invitation to dinner at 7:00. Rachel called Dee over so she could stay with Harry while she prepared for her dinner date. A limousine picked her up at exactly 7:00 p.m., and off she went to the most expensive restaurant in the state. David Monar was waiting for her at the rooftop with a decorated table featuring different exotic foods and drinks. As soon as she walked in, he took her hand and led her to the table. Thank you for honoring my invitation, he said, holding the chair. He was a perfect gentleman. And thank you for the flowers and the dress, Rachel answered. No regrets, he said. You look beautiful. A deep blush warmed her cheeks, and she lowered her head. Thank you. They ate their dinner while talking about the most random things. It had been a while since Rachel spoke to a man this way, but David was so gentle and made everything easy. How did you figure the Chinese officials out, he asked, after they finished their food. I studied Chinese language and culture in school. Wow, he looked impressed. So you speak Chinese? Yes, but I'm still learning. David leaned forward, his eyes bright with admiration. You would be a great addition to my company, Rachel. I want to offer you a job as a translator, he said. Rachel's first instinct was to jump at the job, but she held back to play her cards right. Thank you, but I only accept on one condition. What's that? That you give Dee a job as well, she said. She also lost her job that day. David laughed, and Rachel held her breath. I already gave her a job when I learned how you both lost your jobs, he said. She's the branch supervisor. Rachel grabbed David's arm excitedly. Thank you so much, David. That means a lot to me. Dee is like a sister. I love her so much. I know, David smiled. And what about you? Won't you accept the job I will? She laughed. I'm honored to be a part of your company. 6 months have passed. I've never been to your house, Rachel laughed as they rode the elevator up to David's penthouse apartment. I know, he winked at her. Why do I feel like you're up to something? She side-eyed him, and he laughed heartily. We've been friends for 6 months, he said. I think it's high time you knew my place. Friends, Rachel thought. It had been 6 months since she knew David and her life had improved. She lived in a spacious 2-bedroom house that he bought and drove a Mercedes that he also bought for her. Despite all these things, they remained friends. She was madly in love with him, although she knew he would never look at her any more than being platonic friends. He was way out of her league, and even though she now had a better life, she still knew who she was. The elevator opened into the most beautiful living room she had ever seen. She gasped at the window view and rushed to it, gaping at the stunning view of the city skyline. David, this is beautiful, she cried. When he didn't respond, she turned to see him on one knee, a beautiful box in his hands. Inside it was a luxurious ring. David, her heart almost stopped. I don't want to be just friends anymore, Rachel, he said. I want to mean more than that to you, David. I love you, Rachel said. You are smart, intelligent, and beautiful, he said. You're an asset to me, and I want to be everything you need. Rachel couldn't believe what was happening. David was the best man ever. He was good with Harry and formed a great relationship with Dee and Uncle Rufus because she told him how much they meant to her. For Dee, he took it a step further by funding her college tuition until she graduated. He was the best, but she couldn't get over the crippling anxiety that David was out of her league. Say something, Rachel, he said. David, I have a son, and that I love very much, he said sincerely. He would be a great big brother if you accept my proposal and we have kids. Rachel laughed. Yes, yes, I accept. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a hug. I love you so much, Rachel. You have no idea. I love you too, David. I know, he said. And I have a present for you. What? Rachel laughed happily. He had given her everything money can buy. What more could he surprise her with? You haven't outrightly told me, he said, but I know you've been thinking hard about your parents. Rachel blanched, and tears threatened to fall. Lately she had been regretting cutting off her parents but was scared of reaching out to them after 3 years. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see her parents approach. Her eyes widened, and she stumbled back, shocked and confused. David, how? It took a lot of work, David said, but anything to make you happy, I'll do it. Sweetheart, her mother called softly. Dad's eyes were brimming with unshed tears. Rachel remained frozen for 1 second before launching into their arms. Her parents burst into sobs, and so did she. It's all my fault, Dad cried. I'm so sorry. I was so upset, but I didn't mean all I said. He explained, I called you the next day but couldn't reach you. I went to your school, but no one knew where you were. We tried to trace your phone, and it broke our hearts that we couldn't find you. It's okay, Dad. It's all in the past, Rachel said, wiping her tears. Her joy was full, and today could be the happiest day of her life. She was wearing a rock that bound her to a man she loved more than anything. She had a solid friendship with Dee and Uncle Rufus, a beautiful and intelligent son, and now her parents were back. Life was good.